Hello and welcome to the Amateur of Life and Death podcast. I'm Luke Plymouth.
And I'm Liz Plumpton. Each episode takes a look at a different aspect of the wonderful world of amateur theatre and features amateur theatre makers talking about their theatrical life, theatrical loves, and the times when they've died on stage.
This month's episode focuses on the Great American Musical. Liz will be speaking to Jo Brookes about her role in the upcoming Crescent Theatre company production of Gypsy.
And Luke and I will be talking to Emma Harley from Tinker's Farm Opera to find out more about the company and their upcoming production of Guys and Dolls, which Luke is also appearing in.
Both Gypsy and Guys and Dolls are classic 1950s American stage musicals. So what makes them so great? Let's find out.
Thanks, Luke. And now I'm delighted to be joined by Jo Brookes. Jo is an actor who is currently appearing in the Crescent Theatre's production of Gypsy, playing Louise. Hi, Jo.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on the podcast. So let's get stuck in then. Tell us about your first love.
Oh, my first love. So I would say that I was probably a very theatrical child, musical child as well. And my mum tells this wonderful story about, well, it's one of those stories that feels like a memory because you've been told it so many times, but I was way too young to remember. But there was a particular song that used to come on and I used to want to dance to it. And it was You Can Do Magic. Was it Limmy and Family Cooking? Something, a really old song.
Not sure.
I think it's from the 70s.
Yeah.
But that particular song used to come on and I would just run into the kitchen and get a colander and put it on my head, and that would be like my routine. Every time this song would come on, I'd have to go and get my singing hat out of the kitchen cupboard. But in terms of what actually got me into theatre, I'd seen a lot of productions as a child, gone to the theatre a lot, but I distinctly remember being at school, and our school was split over two sites. So we had like a lower school with year 7 and 8, and then everyone else in sixth formers was at the upper site. And then we used to go to the upper school quite a lot for assemblies and to see productions. And whenever I used to go there, I used to see the drama department rehearsing for a play and all of the costumes and being really blown away by that. The music department with all the instruments and them rehearsing for the choir or a band practice. And also like the art department and things that they were building. And it wasn't until I went to see a school production of Hairspray that I realised all of those departments had come together.
Yeah.
To create this spectacle performance. And I think that must have been the first time I was exposed to a musical, because it just clicked. I was like, that's took so many groups of people to make that happen.
Yeah.
It was just so magical to me. They'd used things from around the school, like big crates that were usually in the canteen as part of the scenery, and I was just so blown away. And I think I must have been in year 8 at that point, and it was like the year 11s and the sixth formers putting on that production, and I was like, I need to be involved when I go to the upper school. So yeah, that's essentially what I did. I picked drama as a GCSE option, carried that on through sixth form, and then was cast in quite a few school productions. Funnily enough, the year 11 school production was a production of Oliver, and it actually was at the Crescent.
Oh, really?
So our school had decided to hire that out. So when I joined the theatre in 2018, that felt like a bit of a full circle moment, because being cast as Nancy in Oliver in the year 11 production, and it was external, so it wasn't in the school hall that we performed in all the prior years.
The big deal.
Felt really like a big professional gig.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really lovely coming back. So I think that was my first love for sure.
Oh, fantastic. And you've been doing musicals ever since?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, my first Crescent show was actually Romeo and Juliet, so that
Not
wasn't
a musical.
And I've done Nell Gwyn as well, which wasn't a musical, but I would say that musicals are where my heart's at.
Yeah, so you're not that old, but so far, what's been the love of your theatrical life?
So I would probably say being cast as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. That was a production that was supposed to go ahead in 2020.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, COVID threw that off for a little while. But that was always a dream role for me. But I think the reason why I would say that's the theatrical love of my life is that it felt like such a journey to get to that point, and it really felt like a light at the end of the tunnel for me during quite dark times that everyone was experiencing, being in isolation, staying at home. And I often joke with Luke actually that there was a lot of running themes in Wizard of Oz, like there's no place like home. We took that very literal in COVID.
Yeah.
And do you remember all of the rainbows like celebrating the NHS? It was like those little motifs that we kept noticing, and it was almost encouraging us, don't lose sight of that journey that you've started and you will get to finish. And I remember, I couldn't tell you what performance it was in particular, but it must have been towards the end of the run when we finally got to do it in, was it September 2021?
September 2021, yeah.
There was a particular moment where, I can't even remember which character asks now, but it must have been someone in Oz had said to Dorothy, oh, how far have you come, or where did you come?
Yeah.
And her line was, oh, just the longest of ways. And that felt really truthful.
Yeah.
Like, we have come on such a journey. It's been the longest of ways. So yeah, I think that's definitely a moment for me that sticks out as being the theatrical love of my life so far.
And if there is one, tell us about the one that got away.
So the musical the year after, in 2022, was Little Shop of Horrors. And throughout my university life, I loved singing Somewhere That's Green. I think I actually ended up performing it for some reason or another every year at uni, whether it was just a social event like the Glee Club or for some assessments as well. And that song very quickly became attached to me on my course. It was like, oh, Jo sings that. That's Jo's song.
Yeah.
So I think Audrey, to play Audrey in Little Shop of Horrors was always sort of a dream role of mine, but it was actually the time when I was working on the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, the 2022 Commonwealth Games, so schedules just wouldn't allow. So I think, yeah, that's the one for me that got away. And I think at the time I was quite keen on potentially auditioning for Audrey 2 as well. I wanted to think, oh, maybe I could give that a good go. As a female voice, it might be quite different to do it like that. But I saw the production, it was phenomenal, and yeah, the right people got the role.
And can you tell us about a time when you died on stage?
So I have two things to mention here. So the production of Oliver that I mentioned in year 11 that was actually here, the guy who was playing Bill Sykes was very into it in the moment of strangling me, and for a very split second I was like, I can't breathe. Am I actually going to die on stage? I think I ended up like sort of tapping his hand, being like, please let go a little bit. Obviously very method of him. He was just very in the moment. So that sticks with me as a moment that I maybe actually nearly did die on stage.
Oh my god.
But another thing I wanted to mention was a school production of Fame. So I was cast as Miss Sherman. I think this would have been maybe year 9 or year 10, so probably 13, 14. In the school hall, very happy with my role. All of my friends were cast in the production with me. And one of my lines as Miss Sherman had 2 character names in, Tyrone and Iris. And I think it was the first performance, I think we did 3 performances in total. The first performance, I was very nervous and I delivered my line but said Tyrus, so I blended the names together. So what I hope I would do now is maybe, recover from that as like a quirky nickname or taking the mick out of them because they're an item. But I corpsed, I froze, I let out a little giggle.
Oh no.
I was very annoyed at myself, and it is still honestly one of those moments that keeps me awake at night. I'm like, I can't believe I did that.
Yeah.
But I think it was a kind of turning point that made the following year production of Oliver here so much more like professional, because I was like, you can't do that again, Jo. You've got to be a professional from now on. That was so unprofessional of you to do.
You probably
that.
were only like 14 or 15.
I was. I'm sure I was like in year 9. So I was very tough on myself. But that still sticks with me. You just want the ground to swallow you up. I could have recovered from that because it was actually quite funny that I'd merged the names, but
I think it's just inexperience, isn't it? Like, I see that sometimes with young people. You just learn from it, and you get better at getting out of the messes you get yourself into on stage.
And like I say, I think it did help for the production that we did here of Oliver, because I was just, I'm a professional now. We're in a professional venue. I've got to be, top of my game.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, Emma, who you're interviewing on this podcast,
Emma Harley,
Emma Harley, she directed me in the production of Oliver. She was great. I think she was in sixth form at the time, or had come back to volunteer.
Yeah.
So it's a very strange coincidence that she's also a guest on this podcast.
Oh wow! How fun! We did not
to
know that when we
no, you didn't
when we arranged the guests, but that is a fantastic link.
Very strange.
Okay, let's talk a little bit now about Gypsy. First performed in 1959. It was an instant hit on Broadway and then all over the world. The piece was loosely inspired by the memoirs of Gypsy Rose Lee, a real person. How does it feel to be taking on such a well-known character, and how much have you researched the show?
So I think this is the second time that I'm casting a character that's based off a real person. But the first time that I've been cast and the person actually had influence over the performance.
Yeah.
So it's based off her memoir, which I think was published 2 years before the musical was on Broadway. So it's quite a quick turnaround to turn that memoir into a stage show. But I think with that comes a certain pressure to get it right, you know. You're portraying a real person, you want to portray their experiences, but what's interesting is it is coined as a fable. So it's from the beginning you sort of know that it's not maybe the whole truth.
True. Yeah.
So in terms of research, originally when I was cast, I did do research, but very quickly realised I don't think I want to dig too much into the truth, because I want to present Gypsy the way that she wanted to be presented. So yeah, I did start doing research, and I'm glad I did that research, because we have some really, really good conversations about characters in rehearsals that have stemmed from doing that original research. But I did stop, and I haven't read the memoir. I want to just take it for what it is and how she wanted to be portrayed.
Yeah.
But again, the pressure that comes with that, yeah, it's a lot.
Gypsy is regarded by many as the ultimate 20th century American musical. What are the ingredients of a great piece of musical theatre for you?
Oh, for me, I think it's visually how it looks. So Gypsy has got so many different locations throughout the show. I think it's 17. I mean, you might know better than me because you're helping with
I
the
have
set.
been painting some of them. I can't claim to have had a massive role, but there's a lot of flats in that workshop at the moment.
There's
and
a
some
lot.
trucks.
Yeah, so it's a lot. I think for me, a musical, when it looks amazing, it looks flawless, the scene changes are so seamless, brings together and makes it something really special. Alongside costumes of this era as well. I love this era for costumes. So yeah, I think those two ingredients, costumes and set, alongside everything else that goes into making a musical. But yeah, I think those are the two.
I think there's something really interesting about, not just musicals, plays in general, which either have sort of plays within them, or they're kind of set in the theatre world. So it's a show business story. As well, which brings, I think, an interesting additional dimension to, you're staging something, and then within the world of the play there are, the performances and the variety and the burlesque and, the tours that happen.
Yeah. And I was having a really interesting conversation with Ava, actually, who's playing June, because we were trying to distinguish when she's June and when she's June acting in the production. And it's those small little changes that she does with her voice when she's having a conversation with me as her sister to when she's performing as June in the show. It's hard to pinpoint when to change that sometimes. But those are the kind of conversations that I love having in the rehearsal room. Pinpointing when are you going to change? When what's your character thinking at this point? Are you performing as this character, this caricature almost, in June's case, or are you just having a conversation?
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And quite hard to portray as well sometimes, portraying an actor who's sometimes acting and other times just being themselves, but you're still acting because obviously you're not that person.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about, but I like that. I like that aspect of the show, and I think I have that to think about quite a lot too through the transformation of Louise throughout the piece. So when I'm looking at my lines and I'm thinking about how I'm delivering them, and I'm looking at the journey in total of how Louise starts at the beginning of the show to what she ends up being
becomes,
at the end, and what she becomes. It's pinpointing those moments of when am I going to make a slight change in my voice? When am I going to get slightly more confident? Is there a moment in particular that I should do this? And I love that about this character.
Yeah. So Gypsy Rose Lee became famous for her burlesque and striptease act, something which also features in the musical, although I should say there is no actual nudity. How are you finding this aspect of the show?
It was daunting to begin with. Yeah. But I've got what they call a body stocking, and I didn't realise what a body stocking was.
Sounds like a very special thing, yeah.
I love my body stocking. But essentially it's like a nude swimming costume, or shapewear. And for me, that was that added level of reassurance that I know I'm never going to be naked. Yeah. There's no possibility of a slip. Like if the dress and the way that we're, creating the costumes to do certain things at certain times, if something went wrong, I'm not gonna, flash the audience. And I think that just gave me that confidence. I know that I'm not naked, and there's no possibility of being naked.
Yeah.
So I can do anything.
Yeah.
In the role with the costumes at the set. So yeah, I think it's daunting, like I say, because I still, it's suggestive.
Still feel, it can still feel quite exposing, even though you're not actually naked.
Absolutely. But again, it goes back to like that character transformation, because even the way that I'm wearing the costumes at the beginning, I'm finding that I'm like hunching my shoulders quite a bit and making myself look probably a bit insecure and not sure of myself, and it's that change in body language as well that comes. So not only the delivering of the lines and pinpointing when she gets more confident in what she says, it's that body language as well. She becomes more comfortable to be naked.
But I guess also she's performing that role of the burlesque, the striptease artist, and I think there's a confidence that comes from, you're not yourself, you're playing a persona, or it's the same as acting, really. And I guess maybe that's what she finds. Yeah, and I find through the piece as well.
Absolutely, I find that with any role that I play, people often ask, "How did you do that? Are you not nervous?" I'm not me when I step out onto those stage, like those boards. Like the second that I walk out, it's not me anymore. It's the character. So I think it's just that switch in mindset can help a lot when it comes to daunting things like stripping.
And so, is that a kind of collaboration between the choreographer and costume? How are you sort of working those routines out in rehearsals?
So Dean, our choreographer, said to me very early on, he wanted it to be led by me. He wanted me to be comfortable in everything that I'm doing, which I was very grateful for. I don't think I would have had a problem for him providing me with the stripping choreography, but it feels a lot more authentic in what I'm doing, that it's come from me and it's what I'm comfortable with doing, and it's what I think Gypsy would have done. She was known for being quite quirky on stage, and the interactions with the audience. And everyone's been very supportive in the rehearsal room. I'll try certain things and it won't work, it'll look silly, and we'll all have a laugh about it. It won't be embarrassing, and I think that's just about creating that safe space in the rehearsal room, which this theatre absolutely does.
So it's a big ensemble, big cast, multiple locations, as we've said, singing, dancing, stripping, and some very iconic songs. All adds up to making it, I guess, a big show. I know musicals generally tend to be bigger shows, but even within the category of musicals, I think this is a big show. Do you enjoy the challenge of that?
Oh, absolutely, because I think your role doesn't just stop with your role. If you're not on stage and you're available, you're moving scenery, you're setting props, and I think it's just that big collaboration piece that comes with performing a musical of this scale. It goes back to what I said about my true love, actually. It's when I realised there's so many departments that are coming together to make this show. Costume, set, music, acting, directing, everything comes together and everyone can get involved and help. And that is the really nice thing about this theatre, is you don't just stay in your lane, you get involved in everything. So I think that's what I like most about big scale productions.
And what's been the most challenging aspect of the role or the show so far?
Definitely pinpointing when my character changes. In fact, it's hairstyles. With the costume changes being as quick as they are, I've had to think a lot about what I'm going to do with my hair in Act 1, what I'm going to do in the interval, how I'm going to do that in a quick change to look glamorous towards the end. So it's not only like the character journey that changes, it's how I look changes, and it's just a lot to think about, and pinpointing that and identifying those moments. I love that. I love sitting and analysing the script and being like, I wonder if that's the moment that she decided that she didn't want this life to be this way, or is that the moment that she decided that she didn't like this character? I find that really interesting to analyse. But yeah,
she's a bit of a butterfly character, isn't she? She kind of goes through that, or ugly duckling, or whatever you want to call it. It's kind of, her story is a little bit of that story.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've had such interesting conversations with Kim, who's playing Mama Rose. One thing I find really, really interesting, actually, is that she decided to make Mama Rose such a big character. I mean, I don't know how much influence Gypsy did actually have in the production of the stage show, but I would assume she did, because it was only 2 years prior that she wrote this memoir.
She must have given permission for them to do it.
Absolutely. But I just find it very interesting, because she could have absolutely wrote this memoir, painted her mother as quite a villainous character, which she does because June had objected to the way that their life was portrayed. And I think there was a quote somewhere that I'd read, like, you're portraying Mama like a monster, and she wasn't. I just find it so interesting that she could have almost painted Mama Rose as a character in a villain way and in a villain capacity to maybe not be in the show as much as she is. And Gypsy could have had the full spotlight, and she could have, it could have been entirely just about her struggle and her journey. But she decided to give that spotlight to her mother, albeit in maybe not a light that she would appreciate. But the songs are phenomenal that Rose sings. The stage, she barely leaves the stage. And I just find that so interesting that she chose to do that.
I think I'm right in saying this. I'm not an expert. Ethel Merman originated the role of Mama Rose, and she was the big star in that original production. And I think I read somewhere they did add some more songs for her because it was her.
Yeah.
So that might have also had an impact, the fact that the biggest name in the original production was playing Mama Rose, and so as stars of that time were wont to do, she might have tried to build a part up.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. And I think I remember reading that originally they wanted Cole Porter to take on this musical, and I think him and Ethel Merman were very close and worked together a lot. But then I also read that Gypsy coached Ethel a little bit on, portray Mama in this way. But I've not read anything about her coaching or having much to do with the actress who played
Sandra
herself,
Church played
which,
Louise.
Again, don't you find that interesting? She's very much focusing on highlighting the mother.
Yeah.
When really she had the ample opportunity to just create a show completely about her. Apart from being called Gypsy, she could have called it Mama Rose, I suppose. But
You spoke a little bit about the one that got away. Is there any other dream role or dream show that you'd love to be in?
We did a play at school, Billy Liar.
Yeah.
I love Billy Liar. I think that's a brilliant, brilliant play, and I think it would be wonderful in the studio. It's like the perfect play for that space. It's set in
we have done it, but before your time, I think.
Absolutely.
Just before I joined, actually, I think was the last time. Yeah.
I'd love to play Barbara, peeling her oranges. I just think that's such a funny role. But yeah, probably that. I feel like my dream role changes every week. I saw a production of The Addams Family here last night by Bourneville, and it sparked that again. I was like, I'd love to play Wednesday.
Yeah.
So it's probably whatever show I've just seen. I'm thinking, I'd love to play that. It does change a lot. But if I had to say maybe my top three, it would be Little Shop of Horrors, Addams Family, and Billy Liar. Not
interesting.
A bit different.
I wondered if, and we'll segue into a slightly different topic here. During COVID, you did some songs on social media to help to raise some money for the Crescent, and you kind of, I don't know if impersonate is the right word. You kind of styled yourself like different singers and performed their songs, which was great. And it kind of made me wonder if you'd ever thought about Little Voice. Do you know the show?
I'm not familiar with that.
Ah, okay.
Oh, Liz, you're going to have to...
So there's a film, quite a famous film with Jane Horrocks. She's just a kind of socially awkward, really shy, really unassuming girl with an older sister and a mum, and her mum gets involved with this guy who's involved in a pretty sort of tacky end of show business, Mr. Boo. Anyway, the whole kind of story of the play is that Little Voice, as she's called, LV, her amazing skill is that she can sing like Shirley Bassey or Judy Garland and Peggy Lee, and she can kind of do all of these. She can, when she takes on that role, she can perform, and it's like an amazing likeness to the original. But then as a person, she's not a performer at all. She's incredibly shy, and
that sounds really interesting.
You should check it out.
I'm going to check that out. Definitely. No, I really enjoyed all of that fundraising stuff that I recorded in lockdown. Shall I give a little
go for it? Yeah.
So this was actually to combat the the blues of not being able to perform was when we could. And I just thought, you know, the arts were struggling anyway due to lack of funding and COVID having to close down all of the theatres. Is there anything that I could do? And I already had a YouTube channel at that point, which I think had 400 subscribers maybe. And I'd just got a job at Asda during the pandemic, and I had a lot more free time. Well, everyone had a lot of free time. But the afternoons, I remember thinking I need something to fill my time with because I was doing really early shifts in the morning. So I'd came up with this idea to do a week of, I think I called it Golden Age songs, to support the Crescent and raise money. And I put my target at £200. And I did a recording, so it was 8 recordings, and ran it as if it was a Crescent show. So I did a performance, so to speak, every night. At 7:30 I'd upload the video of that kind of Golden Age theme. And I ended up raising £2,000, which was incredible. Absolutely exceeded what I ever thought we would raise. And I'm glad it went to this special place.
Which artist did you perform as? Just remind me.
So I did a Peggy Lee, Doris Day, Ethel Merman, Judy Garland. There was a few more. I can't remember them now. But it was the costumes from here. I think I went to a charity shop to get quite a lot of tops and like jewellery bits, and just stuff that I had around. And this was obviously, shops were still open at that point, so everything hadn't completely closed down. And then the wig department here, they were like, come and get whatever you wanted. So I had all of the wigs to play with in my bedroom. And
I mean, those singers are all the kind of little voice, you know, that's kind of what Little Voice is about. She performs as all of those. Is there anything else you'd like to mention or chat about that we haven't covered?
What I would say is I think Gypsy is a very, very underrated show. Not a lot of people know about it, but if you love that kind of era, and you will definitely recognise some of the songs, people are like, oh, that's where that's from. That's where that song's from. So give it a go if you were on the edge about whether coming or not. I think you'd really enjoy it.
Fantastic.
We open very soon.
Yes. So Gypsy is running in the main house at the Crescent Theatre from the 11th to the 18th of May. Tickets are on sale now, so come along and check it out. Thanks very much for coming on the podcast, Jo.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
And we look forward to seeing you in Gypsy.
Thank you.
That was Liz talking to Jo Brookes about the Crescent's upcoming production of Gypsy. Now we're going to turn over to another local amateur theatre group, and we're going to speak to Emma Harley, who is currently directing production of Guys and Dolls.
And now Luke and I are delighted to be joined by Emma Harley from Tinker's Farm Opera. Hi, Emma.
Hello.
Thank you for agreeing to come on the Amateur of Life and Death podcast.
No, thank you for having me.
So, before we talk a bit more about the show that you're directing, can you tell us a little bit about Tinker's Farm Opera?
Okay. Tinker's Farm, they were created in 1953. It was by two teachers who worked at the secondary school, Tinker's Farm Secondary Modern School, called John Thompson and Jeff Perkins. The two were teachers who used to be quite passionate about having performances at schools, etc. And some of the students then were so delighted by the fact that they wanted to do this that they sort of like, sir, can we do this outside of school? And then that's where they then created the company, where they then wrote shows originally in like light opera and stuff. Yep. And then from there they then went to perform shows, well, predominantly operettas and then grand operas, etc. So that was their forte to begin with.
Hence the name, I guess.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it was operatic at one point, then it was opera very much because it very much stuck with opera as their sort of like focus. And then then it wasn't until they performed light operas, but then they used to do things like I remember the one, what was it? I think it was Pirates of Penzance they did, which was like in 2015, 2014. They'll kill me for getting those dates wrong, but it was something around those. Yeah. And they did it in a modern style as bikers instead of doing it when it was, and that was here actually at the Crescent. And then it wasn't until 2017 that they moved to musical theatre.
Okay, they did a lot of Gilbert and Sullivan,
Correct.
I think.
Correct.
At the website.
Correct. So they sort of rotated through all the GNS for a long time. especially things like HMS Pinafore and
Yeah.
so on and so forth. But it's not really my fault. I'm not really an expert on that area at all. But when you sort of come into a company that's been running for so long, you sort of then gain an interest in it in a sense of wanting to understand the history of the company and stuff. And because it's got such a long history of 70 years, you then want to know a little bit more about it. But they definitely did a lot of GNS for a long time.
And I think I'm right in saying that Tinkers Farm's association with the Crescent Theatre goes back to the 60s.
Correct.
So that would have been the second Crescent Theatre building on Cumberland Street.
Yes, that's right. So they went. So that was their first sort of move into a big theatre. Before, like they used to do it in like community hall, in the school halls and things.
Yeah.
And then that was the sort of point where Tinkers went, oh, we're gonna be brave here, and we're gonna go. Let's go into a theatre, and they chose the Crescent. So yes.
I don't know if you know the answer to this, but do you know why they moved away from operettas and into musical theatre?
I think they found that the audience was sort of dwindling in terms of opera. It's very much a niche sort of following, isn't it? Yeah. You'd argue the musical theatre is in a way, but it's a bigger following.
Sure.
Whereas opera tends to be very a select audience. And I think that they thought, for the company's sake, they thought, we need to do something here to keep this company going and to keep its legacy going. And musical theatre seems to be the answer. So I joined the company in 2016.
Okay.
And then we performed in 2017.
Right, okay. So, and is that how long you've been personally involved with it?
So I only directed the youth companies before.
Sure.
So I used to be part of Langley Youth Theatre, which is now TFO Youth, because we've merged the two. And I had a phone call off Dave Pitton, who is our lighting designer and works for Going Dark Theatrical Company. And he just phoned me and he said, right, a man called John Lehman is about to phone you. Just answer the phone and say yes. And I was like, what? What on earth is this? Anyway, this man called John, who I knew nothing of at the time, phones me and says, hello, my name's John Lehman. I'm the chairman of Tinkers Farm Opera Society. And we're on the lookout for a producer. And I thought to myself, so in my head, I'm thinking a producer is someone who puts money into the show. And I'm thinking, hold on, mate, I haven't got money here. And he's like, oh, no, so sorry. That's what we call our directors. And I was like, oh, right, okay. So then I had to go into an interview, and I was up against a couple of other people. And then poor them, they were stuck with me because they brought me on. And then that's sort of where then I've sort of been... They've been stuck with me ever since, really. So, yeah.
Because obviously you're a director. What do you have to fulfil other roles in the group as well?
Yes, I stupidly take on directing, choreography, and producing at the same time.
Okay. Yes.
Fun.
Yeah. Just for disclosure, I know the answer to that question because I am. But yeah.
Luke is appearing in Tinkers Farm Opera's current production. We'll come on to that in a minute. Yes. So you've been involved with Tinkers Farm Opera for 7 or 8 years?
Yes.
What is it that's special about the group for you?
One of the things that I think that Tinkers, or we try to pride ourselves on, is trying to be very family orientated and try to be quite friendly. I'm very much a believer in having fun in a rehearsal, as long as you get the job done. And for some, and obviously I can't talk on behalf of other societies and things, but like some of the company will say to you, oh, it's not like this when it's quite strict in other societies. And then I think to myself, oh, am I being too lax in my rehearsal room maybe? But I think that it's very much all inclusive.
Yeah.
Everybody we try to allow to have a moment to shine and do what they're strong in. But equally, we won't ever push somebody to do something that they're uncomfortable in. And we try to play on people's strengths. And the friendships that are formed within the company is quite special. There's quite big friendship groups within it that have been formed because of the society. So that's what I'd say is quite special about it, really. Yeah.
So this year you're producing the classic American musical Guys and Dolls. So how does this group select its shows, and what attracted you to Guys and Dolls?
Okay. In terms of the show selections, that's down to the committee. The committee tend to have okay, I'll talk about Guys and Dolls first. So Guys and Dolls, originally, they were going to do in 2020.
Right.
And we'd nearly rehearsed it all and it was nearly ready, and then the pandemic hit. So obviously that then went down the pan, and we sort of thought, oh, are we ever going to revisit it and sort of do it? And after the pandemic had happened, we sort of went, oh, okay, we want to do KIPS, because we don't want to necessarily start straight away with Guys and Dolls. Let's start with something fresh. We've got a smaller society, because when we were doing Guys and Dolls originally, we had like 45 people.
Wow.
Which for a show like Guys and Dolls lends itself really, because you've got like your Sally Army, your guys, and then your hot boxers, etc. So it lends itself to a big company. And at the time, when we came back after the pandemic, it was hard, like it was for most societies, to sort of build yourself back up again. And we did a concert where we only had 14, 15 people, and we thought we've got to sort of push ourselves. So we did KIPS, which was amazing, but then again we only had 24 in that cast, I think it was. Then the company decided, okay, let's revisit Guys and Dolls, and let's go with it, and let's try and reach out and see who comes forward. And then we were lucky in the sense, like your good self, Luke, and then people like Ray and Emma, etc. People did come forward for this show, which was then, so that's why they went for it. In terms of show selection, the committee will sit down, and it's a long, grueling process, and they tend to whittle it down to like 8 musicals, and then they'll all put their pitches forward. And then they'll discuss it in detail of, okay, what's right? Then you've also got to bear in mind, you also then have to look at what other societies within the area are doing. Then you've got your whole, what's available? Because I won't name them because I might be told off for naming them. But there were 2 shows that they were going to do next year that straight away we were told, you can't do it because somebody else is doing it, or you can't do it because it's going out on a UK tour. So then that straight away limits straight back down to where you wanted to be.
Sure.
And then so the committee as a whole tend to choose the shows. Yeah.
Nice. So Guys and Dolls premiered on Broadway in 1950 and ran for 1,200 performances, winning the Tony Award for Best Musical. Its popularity has endured ever since, with numerous revivals around the world. What do you think makes it such a popular show?
For me, the first time I ever saw it was with Sophie Thompson and David Haig and Jamie Parker, and it was moving to the Savoy, but they did a limited run in Birmingham as sort of like the taster, which I love when they do that, because I think, oh, brilliant, we get to see a bit of what the West End are going to get before the West End get it, and I love it when that happens. And it was just it was uplifting, and it was, you came away, in there's shows where you go to and you get that sort of like buzz after seeing it.
Yeah.
It was one of those. It was so cleverly staged. Like it was pretty much like, they had like these neon lights behind, but then everything else there wasn't really a set with it. It was very minimalist in that respect, because the behind was such a big thing. But it was one of those shows where you come out from it and you're singing the songs, or you're remembering bits from it, especially things like Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat, or Look, Be a Lady, or even Guys and Dolls. Like, they just they get stuck in your head. In terms of it's amazing how much of it can still be relatable to an audience now, which, considering it was written in the 50s, and actually it was based on the newspaper stories by David Runyon that were written in like the 20s and the 30s to sort of talk about these like 20s and 30s gangsters in New York. And then he created all these characters, didn't he? Which is what Guys and Dolls is based on. So it's based on like the idol of Sarah Brown or whatever it is. So it's only Adelaide that was added into the show for Vivian Blaine at the time in 1950. So everything was like based on these stories. And it's amazing really how it can still transcend to an audience now. I mean, the West End production keeps being extended and extended and extended, but they've gone in a different feel of making it immersive, haven't they? Whereas we haven't got the privilege to be able to do something like that. When you've in theatres, there'll never be a stage production like that at all again, other than at the Bridge. But I think that the songs are popular. Yeah. I think that the story is easy to follow. Yeah. Which with some shows now, it's not easy to follow if you don't know it already, or with some things like this, people go and watch the film with Frank Sinatra, and although that film is fabulous. There are bits where the stage show lends itself better than the film. The sets are bigger and things in a film, aren't they? But in terms of a musical, I think it flows better. But I think it's a fun show. I think it's got heart. Yeah. Of two love stories. You've got this relationship of Nathan and Adelaide that have been engaged for 14 years. And I think there's lots of people who can relate to that situation now in like these long-term relationships where, they, won't they? And then you've also then got this resistance relationship of Sarah and Sky who sort of fall in love, not instantly, but they sort of grow in their relationship. So you're watching these two relationships around then this sort of like bromance between Benny and Nicely. Sure, yeah. So it's all about these relationships that I think at least somebody in the audience will sit there and go, oh, I can relate to that because of this. So I think that's probably why it keeps being revived. More over here than over on Broadway, which is interesting, really.
Which is interesting, actually, isn't it, considering it's set in America.
Totally.
Yeah.
Have you seen the one at the Bridge?
I have not. However, our cast member Tony Newbold has seen it, I think, 5 times now. He keeps going down and keeps seeing it and keeps telling me how I need to go and see it because it's meant to be incredible. And the staging sounds amazing and that you're sort of guided round and told where to stood. I find that sort of fascinating. So I haven't. But part of the reason I haven't is because I find that if I go and watch a show I'm doing, you then go and watch it and you go, oh no, I should have done it like that. Or you then start thinking, oh no, I've staged it all completely wrong. And I think because we can't do it immersive like they have, I've chosen not to go and see it until after we've finished. Then after we've finished, I plan to go down there and see it. So then I can sort of go, oh, that's how they do this. Okay, so there is an intention as to why I haven't seen it. Yeah. Which is a shame because I absolutely adore Marisha Wallace. And I think she's wonderful. And she's just left now. But that I did want to, but I've purposely avoided it because of this. Yeah.
One of the criteria people sometimes use for what makes a great musical is a cohesive book and a story where the songs drive the plot or reveal more about characters. And that's sometimes a criticism of jukebox musicals is that they don't really, they've been like bolted in. And do you think that applies to Guys and Dolls?
I think so. I'm not a fan of a show when it sort of feels like they're just singing for the sake of singing. Whereas I don't feel like it does that with this. A couple of them you could argue if you were going to sit there and be majorly critical, maybe. However, I think that it lends itself. I think that the stories add to the songs add to the story even. Especially things like, if I think of Adelaide's Lament's a good example. Yeah. That's telling all about that. You learn a lot about her within that space of that 4 minutes that she's singing. Sky, when he sings My Time of Day, you're sort of learning about how his relationship with the city and learning about how actually there's a softer side to that character that you don't see necessarily before that point. Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat's a whole storytelling number. Yeah. And it lends itself because you hear all these little stories beforehand. So like Benny has to stand up beforehand and says something. And then Big Jules stands up and says something. And then it lends itself to lead into the story from Nicely. So in Guys and Dolls' case, I would argue it very much tells and it adds to it.
So we've been talking a lot about Guys and Dolls. Can you tell us when and where the show is on and how our listeners can find out about Tinker's Farm Opera and maybe get involved in future productions?
I can. So it is running from the 15th to the 18th of May at the Stourbridge Town Hall. Tickets are available at www.ct.co.uk/GAD, capital G, capital A, capital D.
And you hold open auditions for your
We
productions?
do, so we're always actively looking for new members. So coming up with the society, as soon as we finish this, we then have a couple of weeks break, but then it's auditions for Vicar of Dibley, because we also have now started doing comedy plays. So they did Heidi High first, then they've done Hello Hello, and now we're doing Vicar of Dibley. Yes.
And where are you based? Where do you rehearse and perform?
So we are based at Lutley Community Centre in Halesowen, because originally we were over towards Northfield. But as the company have moved more towards Stourbridge and stuff, a lot of our company are based around like Halesowen and Stourbridge and that sort of thing. So Lutley was sort of where it was. We're based on a Thursday, which is when we rehearse, and then Sundays we rehearse at Clent Parish Hall, so that's sort of our two main floats that we sort of resident at.
Fantastic, thank you. So now we come to our backstage binaries.
Oh.
These are quick-fire questions, and we're just looking for your first instinctive response from two choices.
Okay.
And then at the end, we'll give you a chance to clarify any of your choices that you would like to.
Okay.
Okay? Right.
Okay.
On stage or backstage?
Backstage.
Acting or directing?
Directed.
Lighting or sound?
Oh gosh, they'll kill me either way. Lighting.
Rehearsal or performance?
Performance.
Tech or dress?
Dress.
Sing or dance?
Ooh. Sing.
Hair or makeup?
Makeup.
Modern or period?
Period.
Comedy or tragedy?
Comedy.
Set or props?
Oh, both are the bane of my life. Set.
Sit down or rock the boat?
Oh, rock the boat all the way.
Great. Are there any of those choices that you'd like to clarify or that you found particularly difficult?
Lighting and sound, they're both equally important, and all of our team. So you've got that work with us. So we have Going Dark Theatrical, and then we have Dan Woodall, he's on sound. And they all work an absolute, they're so hardworking and they're fabulous. But yes, I find that lighting and sound are equally important. You need sound to be able to hear them all, and then lighting, you need to be able to see them all. So I think both are very, that would be really difficult to choose. Yeah.
There you go. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast, Emma. It's been amazing to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, you're very, very welcome. And I look forward to being in Guys and Dolls in the near future, and hopefully anybody interested who is listening to this, hopefully they will look forward to seeing it in May.
Yes.
Thank you.
Come and see Luke. He's fabulous. Absolutely fantastic.
Thank you for listening to the Amateur of Life and Death podcast. If you'd like to listen to more, make sure you subscribe at podcast.crescent-theatre.co.uk or via Spotify or Apple Podcasts to get the next episode.
You can find out more about the Crescent Theatre Birmingham and our upcoming productions, including Gypsy, by visiting www.crescent-theatre.co.uk or by following us on social media.
And you can find out more about Tinker's Farm Opera by visiting www.tinkersfarmopera.com. Amateur of Life and Death is a Crescent Theatre production. This episode was researched and presented by Luke Plimmer and Liz Plumpton. The music is by Brendan Stanley, and this episode was edited by Liz Plumpton.